It's just perfect comedy. And yes, B. Arthur can exhale in a way that can make a rolling laugh occur, right? She exhales, we all start to laugh, then it hits you again and again, and she just holds the exhale and her big eyes, and it's miraculous. I love them so much.
Welcome, welcome to Stan, the podcast where we dissect our enthusiastic and at times obsessive relationships with cultural phenomena. I mean, have you ever caught yourself unironically insisting that it's not just a phase? Or stayed up all night to finish that book that you just can't put down? Or have you ever had such a huge crush on a celebrity that it made your heart physically ache? I have. So join me as we figure out why certain things or people capture our attention and affection so well. I'm really happy that you're here. My perception of the natural progression of a woman aging has been so scrambled by the rise in cosmetic surgery. That's not to pass judgment on individual choices. I mean, do you, diva? I just mean that even though you can be consciously aware of changes in culture, you don't realize how deeply it's affected your subconscious until the damage is already done. That became extremely clear to me in the middle of conversation about the iconic Golden Girls, wherein I was discussing the cast as if they're in their late 70s and early 80s, when my guest gently corrected me and told me they were supposed to be in their 50s. I could go on forever about the societal pressure for women to look as if they're in their teens, well into their 40s. This is meant to be so that they can remain sexually desirable in a culture where we seem to value youth, to be clear, as a proxy for financial and emotional control over all else. The funny thing is, even as you do age, you still can't avoid being aggressively sexualized. Has anyone else seen the comment all over their TikTok FYP, just because the wrapper is wrinkled doesn't mean the candy isn't sweet? Ugh, it's a mess. No wonder women are terrified of aging these days. Golden Girls was one cultural phenomena, though, that aimed to offset this fear even a little bit. If you're unfamiliar, or you just need a little reminder, I got you. The Golden Girls premiered in 1985, and it followed the lives of 4 women living in Miami. It begins with Blanche, played by Rue McClanahan, who puts out an advertisement for a roommate after her husband dies. Both Dorothy, played by B. Arthur, and Rose, played by Betty White, respond to the advertisement after a divorce and a death, respectively. Finally, Dorothy's mother, Sophia, played by Estelle Getty, moves in with them after her nursing home burns down. It ran for 7 seasons over 7 years and produced 180 episodes. Throughout that time, the women encounter and overcome issues together, and according to its fans, the magic of the show lies in the incredibly sharp dialogue and humor. They recruited titans of comedy who had really perfected their timing and delivery, and the group had a real charisma that just made every scene sing. The fact that scene partners had such charisma is all the more surprising, considering that the series ended due to problems on set. The main issue was said to be between co-stars Betty White and B. Arthur. Betty White was playing a character that was meant to be extremely happy-go-lucky and ditzy, and she had a more playful approach to her job, apparently trying to interact with the audience and break the fourth wall, whereas B. Arthur really prided herself on her professionalism and what she considered to be respect for the craft. The opposite approaches to work meant that the actresses were regularly clashing. These problems never really made it onto the show, though. In fact, Golden Girls was nominated for 68 Emmys and won 9. Each of the main characters received one, and the production team got one for writing, directing, 2 for being an outstanding comedy series, and 3 for technical direction. This show stands to prove that living room sitcoms, of course, can be masterpieces. Beyond the humor, it was hailed for being really ahead of its time in terms of social issues. It was the 80s, so network television wasn't necessarily as political as media can be today, but they dedicated episodes to LGBTQ rights, abortion, ageism, job discrimination, and most importantly, homelessness. Perhaps this is what gave it such long-standing traction in mainstream culture. Another reason is that they had their key demographics locked in, namely the girls and the gays. For the latter, it was said that if you were in a gay bar at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night when the show was in season, they would turn off the music and crank up the Golden Girls. It's said that gay people resonated with the outsider status of the main characters, as well as sharing a campy, sharp, sarcastic sense of humor that defined the show. The show also plays into this fascination with female friendships. I mentioned there are a few shows that share the formula of having 4 female leads, and the storyline revolves around their lives and social dynamics, namely Girls, Sex and the City, and Desperate Housewives. Or maybe it's just because there's such a distinct disinterest in the internal lives and social dynamics of women that I'm feasting on scraps. Who's to say? This is one of the many things I got to speak about with Mandy Kaplan of the Make Me a Nerd podcast. Mandy is an expert on all things Golden Girls, and being a writer and performer herself, she has such an interesting perspective on why the show struck a comedic chord with so many people. We get into whether the Golden Girls was born from genuine interest in telling stories of older ladies, or just opportunistic tokenism, whether social issues ever gain meaningful traction through fictional media, and how the Golden Girls set the tone for comedic writing structures that are yet to be successfully imitated. It was such a pleasure to meet with Mandy. She is so creative and charismatic and engaging, and her genuine love for the Golden Girls really shines through. I know you'll be just as charmed by her as I was. Without further ado, here's our conversation.
Thank you for being a friend.
I am Mandy Kaplan, and I host a podcast called Make Me a Nerd, which I think is how you found me. And my mission is really, as you'll hear by my love of sitcoms, I'm a very mainstream person, but everyone in my life is really into roll-top table playing games, and I didn't say that right, tabletop role-playing games, and fantasy and romantasy and sci-fi, and I've always just held it at arm's length. So my podcast allows me to explore all of these things now that I'm an old lady, and I'm loving it all. I'm also a singer and an actor and a writer, and I have a movie on Tubi called 30 Nights of Sex to Save Your Marriage that I wrote and starred in. And everybody can check those things out.
I will link them all in the show notes.
Thank
that sounds
you.
so fun.
It's hilarious.
You said, oh, I've tried to stay away from it. Was that an intentional decision? Or was
Yeah.
it like, how come?
I think, not to get deep and I won't cry, but I didn't think I was smart enough for it all. Everyone who I knew that played Dungeons and Dragons, they were like the really smart kids. And I just thought, I'm not going to understand it. I'm not going to be able to follow the lore. I check out when it's like thousands of years ago, there was a, and I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So even mainstream stuff like Game of Thrones, I didn't do because I was like, ooh, dragons and fights and I just don't, I didn't think that was my sensibility until now.
That's so sad because there usually seem to be like quite an inclusive space, but I definitely can relate to the idea of not feeling smart enough because you have to hold so many concepts in your head and everything is super consistent. Like once you're in the midst of a Dungeons and Dragons thing, you don't want to have someone be like, sorry, what are the rules again?
Although I'm finding everyone who comes on my podcast is so inclusive and they're not gatekeeping. And when I first pitched the idea to a very nerdy friend, am I allowed to swear on your show?
You may swear away.
Yes. Okay. So I said, will you come on my show? I've never really thought about Star Wars. And he was like, I'm not coming on your show and having you shit all over things I love. And I was like, oh, that's not my intention. My intention is to figure out what I've been missing out on, which is what I'm doing. Now, I haven't loved everything. But so once I established my intentions are good, everyone comes on the podcast and they're excited to get me into Tolkien and Star Trek and everything because they know I'm there to really try to enjoy everything. They're not gatekeeping.
There are so few spaces for like genuine curiosity. And I totally understand like people are dealing with their own insecurities. I don't know, made fun of for being into those kinds of things. But it's such a healing thing to be able to ask like genuine curious questions because I think a lot of people have a lot of distrust. One of the things that you said that you loved and got you through a certain period of life was the Golden Girls. When exactly did you get into the Golden Girls?
Well, is there a visual component to your podcast? I look like I might have been a cheerleader in high school, like a popular girl.
You do.
I was not. I was a theater nerd, and I was home with my mom on Saturday nights, appointment television, watching the Golden Girls. Just me and my mom. Every Saturday night. That was my form of nerdery. I didn't play Dungeons and Dragons, but I could recite episodes of Golden Girls and Family Ties and, dare I say, The Cosby Show. I know I'm a lot older than you are, but that was my era of TV.
And it was a golden era for that kind of TV as well.
Yeah, great sitcoms. Roseanne. I mean, it was a good time. And now everybody's canceled and I'm not supposed to talk about those things, but I loved it all. I've always been a sitcom person.
How old were you at this point?
The Golden Girls came on in like 85. I would have to look it up. I was middle school at that point.
And you and your mom would watch them together?
Every week. And this was before DVR and all of that. So you had to not make plans, which wasn't a problem for me in high school.
Was high school a particularly rough time, or were you pretty happy?
I think that there are rough times for everybody. And middle school was excruciating. I was bullied. I tried to transfer school. Like, it was bad. And in high school, I found my theater gang, and they were wonderful. And I was happy with doing theater, but it didn't make my dance card full per se. So I was offed home on Saturday nights, and this was also way before social media. So I wasn't aware if everyone was, to quote Mandy Kaplan, hanging out without me. That could have very well been, but I was just content with my mom.
What drew you into the story, into Golden Girls specifically? What was it that you resonated with?
Well, I think, so my mom loved classic television. So the first sitcoms I loved were Dick Van Dyke, Mary Tyler Moore. And this is of that ilk, with a lot of the same actors and humor. So I was raised, Mary Tyler Moore was my idol of all time, and I was raised in that world. So when it was like, Maude is going to be with the Happy Homemaker, why can't I think of Betty White's name on Mary Tyler Moore, I was just beside myself. Like, I knew all these ladies from all the TV shows I had been watching, and then here they were together, except Estelle Getty, who was from the theater.
So you were like counting down before the show was released as well?
That I don't remember. My mom probably just said, oh my gosh, B. Arthur and Betty White and Rue McClanahan are on a show together, let's watch. And I was totally excited.
What about when you started watching? Was it like an instant hit?
Instant. Have you seen it?
I started watching summaries the other days, and I feel like the thing is, I have a different relationship to television. I'm not really a binger, and I feel like Golden Girls would make me a binger. I have this infuriating thing, and I don't know what this is about, but I will start a TV show and then like lose interest like 2-3 episodes in. But it's not on streaming services, I don't believe, but I know it would be for me. Like, I know I would love the Golden Girls, and I see the clips of it all the time, but I definitely have like a lot of social media figures or public figures would be like, oh, which Golden Girl are you? Mm-hmm. So I know that's like a cultural reference point. I know it'll be something that I get very, very into. And for that reason, I'm kind of like intentionally distancing myself from it a little bit, because I'm like, I feel like this is too my alley.
You're depriving yourself. You'll be a better person. The humor on the Golden Girls is universal. I don't know a person who can watch it and not laugh. They are at the top of their game comedically. The writing is so sharp. These are the writers who went on to do Arrested Development and Desperate Housewives. And I mean, these are the most clever writers at the time, all together. It doesn't just appeal to older people or ladies or the gays. It's for everyone. Teenage son laughs at it. My straight husband laughs at it.
Speaking about the women being at the top of their game, their comedic timing should be studied. In the clips that I've seen, it's so exacting. It's such an art. Like, you can see the years of experience that they've put into it. And this is just from like clips. This isn't even me watching it.
It's just perfect comedy. And yes, B. Arthur can exhale in a way that can make a rolling laugh occur, right? She exhales, we all start to laugh, then it hits you again and again. And she just holds the exhale and her big eyes. And it's miraculous. I love them so much.
Scene.
I think because I'm a musical person, they did a lot of musical numbers, and those are the ones that stick out to me. And they did like a children's production of The Sky is Falling. I did a voice in the Disney movie, and I don't even remember the name of it. But watching them in giant feathered costumes and tights, like dancing and singing original music, The Sky is Falling, it is beyond magic. They did so much singing and dancing. They all have that background. And those are my favorite moments, other than like a million quotes.
Do you think they could make something similar now? Because there are so many there were so many really successful sitcoms. They don't have the atmospheres for something that is so successful and has such longevity. And I don't know whether it's because of streaming or whether it's because of production budgets or...
They have a new Golden Girls, is what they call it, on Hulu. It's called Mid-Century Modern, and it's from the Will and Grace people. It's Nathan Lane and Matt Bomer, who is surprisingly hilarious, and Nathan Lee Graham, who's a genius. The premise being now, instead of ladies, they're older gay men in Palm Springs, but they're facing the same dating troubles, and it's very sitcom. It's very multicam. They even had Linda Lavin as Nathan Lane's mom. She passed, unfortunately, but they had a very Dorothy Sophia charm to them. And they're calling it Golden Girls Reborn. I think it got a second season. It was fantastic. Hot in Cleveland ran on TV Land for, I think, 6 seasons. That came close to this magic. So it can be done. But as a writer in Hollywood who is pitching a project starring 2 older women, everyone loves the Golden Girls, and it changed everything. And now we want to hear older women's stories. But not really. What if they're in their 40s? What if it's Jennifer Aniston? Instead of, like, we have Sally Field as our dream cast because we want older ladies. Well, what if it's J-Lo? What if we go young? And that defeats the purpose of this generation of women who feel unseen.
Yes, I was about to say, with the Golden Girls, every single thing that I've been told from media, from women in my life, from books, is you will get to a certain age and become invisible. And you will become unimportant. People will be disinterested in you. And I was hoping that you would say that the legacy of Golden Girls was that we suddenly became aware of the value again of older ladies' stories. They address a lot of social issues that were way ahead of their time. But I was hoping that it would have marked a slight turning point, at least, or slightly improved the lot of an older/elderly lady in being important, in being constructive, in being part of society. But unfortunately, I just don't see the remnants of that at all.
Unfortunately, it feels like tokenism. You know, NBC could proudly say, we aired the Golden Girls. Now we don't have to deal with old people on our shows for decades because we aired the Golden Girls. That's what it feels like. I do think in a grandfathered legacy way, it inspired Only Murders in the Building, which I love.
Yes.
Grace and Frankie. But it's sad that I could name all the shows for which it paved the way on one hand.
Especially as someone working in Hollywood, like, I feel the pressure, and I'm not working in Hollywood at all, of like having a window of relevancy in my life. And it must be times 100 million, and it's so unfair. Like, these women, as we were just saying, like, they're at the top of their game. They should be studied for their comedic timing, for their acting, for their professionalism. They have so much to offer, and they're just not being given the opportunity. I had mentioned about being ahead of their times in terms of addressing social issues. Was that an aspect of the story that you enjoyed, or was this something only in hindsight that it seems quite revolutionary?
I loved every aspect of it. I like, particularly there's an episode where Blanche thinks she's pregnant because she misses her period. And they're all going, oh my God, well, we'll help you raise the baby. And because menopause was not discussed at the time, it didn't occur to any of these educated, smart women to say, no, you're not pregnant, dumbass. You're going through menopause. So she had to go to a doctor who had to explain it to her. And it was like this shock for all of them that in their 50s, they were going to go through menopause.
And menopause is such a huge change in your health.
Tell me about it.
Only recently, I think people are talking about it in actual medical spaces, but they're definitely not talking about it in social spaces. And the only time I've ever seen it on TV was in Sex and the City 2, when Samantha is trying to like prolong having her period. It becomes a source of a joke rather than a serious and sensitive conversation. It's insane. They're talking about the disbelief in women's health, which is unfortunately still a huge issue now. Ageism, which we touched on, homelessness, again, a huge issue. And then it seemed that they seem to be at the forefront of like LGBT rights.
Well, there are 2 very special gay episodes and dealt with gut-busting humor. So Dorothy's childhood friend comes to visit. Her name is Jean, and Jean falls for Rose. That's Betty White's innocent character who wouldn't understand that kind of thing. So they're trying to protect Rose from Jean's feelings. And Blanche gets all confused and says, well, what do you mean? She's a thespian. It's fine. And they have to scream, not thespian, lesbian, lesbian. And Blanche goes, lesbian, lesbian. And then Blanche is only insulted that she chose Rose over her. And it's all hilarious. It's not upsetting. And then in a different episode, Blanche's brother Clayton comes to town with his boyfriend. And Blanche really can't accept it. And it is a very meaningful situation to watch her accept her brother for who he is and try to be happy for him that he found love. And it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. I don't remember a ton of that on TV at the time.
Because sitcoms were so central to like cultural conversations, because we didn't have these like multi-platform streaming and everybody was invested in watching the same episodes every week. Did it mark any sort of change in your conversations in the real world that you found salient?
I don't think my friends were watching Golden Girls. Again, they were probably hanging out and partying without me, and I was home with my mom quoting the Golden Girls. And I grew up in Massachusetts, which is a very liberal, progressive state, thank God.
Right.
And I grew up a theater kid, so I always had gay friends, thank God. So I don't think Golden Girls was changing the way people think. I hope it was changing the way their generation thought. My grandparents loved Golden Girls. That cracked them up. And my grandparents, may they rest in peace, slightly bigoted. That was of their generation. So maybe for them, it could have been eye-opening that it's okay that Blanche's brother is gay.
Yeah.
Emily, have you noticed that fan fiction is everywhere lately?
Everyone and their mother is talking about fic. But, is it just me, or are a lot of people getting everything about fandom wrong?
It's definitely not just you. Good thing we can do something about it. Hi, I'm V Arrow.
And I'm Emily J.
And we host This Week in Fandom History.
Whether shipping is a new word in your vocabulary or you were an early adopter of the Omegaverse, This Week in Fandom History is your source for all the context mainstream conversations about fandom are missing.
We take a weekly deep dive into the events that shaped fandom as we know it, and we look at why those moments still matter today. From Victorian Sherlock Holmes fans wearing mourning garb
To the immortal Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way,
we get deep into the who, what, and why behind fandom's highest highs and weirdest lows. Follow This Week in Fandom History on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Can you tell me about the peak of loving Golden Girls? You said that you couldn't quote every episode and you were staying at home on the weekends and watching it. Was there like a moment about your parasocial relationship with these ladies that you remember now?
It's the finale. My mom and I were sitting on her bed, sobbing like a death in the family, sobbing. And they did it really beautifully where Dorothy's going to move out. She's found love with Leslie Nielsen, who's hilarious, and she's going to move out, and she makes a speech to the girls that at this time in my life, I didn't think I would find this kind of friendship and cheesecake and laughter and love, and they all hug, and Dorothy leaves, and my mom and I were sobbing, and then Dorothy comes back in for one more hug, and then she leaves, and then she comes back in from a different door for one more hug. So you're like laughing through your tears, which is my favorite combo of emotions.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then when she's really gone, the three remaining ladies, I'm going to cry, they look at every door waiting for her to pop up again. But she's really gone, and they just dissolve into a hug, and they start to sob. And the show was over. And I know there was Golden Palace. We shouldn't even talk about it. It was so terrible. But my mom and I were like, what are we going to do with ourselves?
Yeah, that's so impactful. That's so lovely.
They did it so well, but it was emotional.
Yeah. And looking back, or even in the moment, do you ever feel like your relationship to the TV show edged into something a little bit obsessive, a little bit unhealthy? Just wondering.
Oh, God, that's funny. I mean, no, because it's all positive. There's a live show in LA every once in a while where 4 guys dress up in drag and they'll do an episode on stage. I've seen those. There's a cruise. I won't go that far. But I have to tell you, I met my writing partner. We've had a writing partnership for, 6 years now. And I met him because a friend introduced us and said, I think you two are the biggest Golden Girls fans in the world. Go. And we bonded immediately. And he said, come out to my car. I want to show you something. And he had a Dorothy Zbornak like costume in his trunk left over from Halloween.
Truly.
We have been friends and partners based on our mutual love of Golden Girls. Obviously now it runs much deeper. But that's how this all started. And we would that was like 20 years ago, when we would send each other Facebook Golden Girls memes and happy birthdays. And and he'll listen to this because it has to do with the Golden Girls. My partner Jonas, I love him. And so Golden Girls does bring people together, but I don't think obsessive.
Do you feel like it influenced your writing at all?
Oh, yes. I think their jokes were bang on, and they would do a joke and then pile on another one and then refer back to it. And that's how I like to write my comedy. I want to milk it for every drop.
Do you ever meet any of the Golden Girls?
B. Arthur and I went to the same eye doctor, so I would see
Huge.
her in the waiting room. She was not a warm lady. Very quick story, when my husband and we had been friends for many years before we started dating. And when we started dating, we had been together like 5 months. And it was Valentine's, and he gave me a book. It was like a book where it was like flip the pages, and he was saying all these beautiful romantic things to me for Valentine's Day. But I started worrying that he was proposing, and it felt too soon. We had only been dating for a few months, and I was like, I mean, I love you and all, but... And so I started feeling like sick to my stomach, and on the second to last page it said, "So I have a question." And I think my hands were like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I flipped the page, and it said, "Will you go to B. Arthur with me?" And she was doing a live show, one-woman show, and he had gotten us tickets. And I had to marry him after that.
That's the best story.
I know. He's the best. They're the best. She was wonderful on stage. But no, I never like worked with or met any of them.
It is quite a formula, like the 4 women, like tracing it through different stages of your life. So there's Girls in New York, like early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's Sex and the City, which is early 30s, mid 30s. And then there's Desperate Housewives. And then there's Golden Girls. And so I hadn't realized that it had become a bit of a formula from which people started to write.
Yeah.
And so I'm familiar with all of those 3. And that's almost another reason why I'm like, I should be watching Golden Girls so that I can trace this formula that I love so much throughout the lifetime of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch any of those other ones as well? Because that's another thing where people go, oh, like, which Golden Girl are you? Which Girls from Girls are you? Which Sex and the City character are
Right.
you?
I watched Sex and the City religiously. I've seen all of those. The other 2 I never got into. I don't know why. And I tried, and it wasn't for me. Especially Girls, not for me.
Do you know what Girls? All of the girls are like slightly annoying and like very millennial and very of their time and seemingly entitled, and it's a satire. When I watched it as a teen, I was like, oh my God, these girls are so annoying and this isn't funny at all. And only recently, and I guess this is because Lena Dunham put out her memoir this year,
Correct.
there's been a resurgence of Girls. I decided I'd give it another go, and it hit so much better for me. You mentioned you went to go and see B. Arthur on stage. Did you keep up with the actors and actresses afterwards?
I mean, I watched them throughout their careers, but as we lost them one by one, people would call me on the day and say, oh my God, I just read Rue McClanahan died. Are you okay? Because I felt it was so emotional, and I was fine. I'm not like, I think it would be crazy if I were mourning like they were actual people I knew. But when Betty White was gone, it was like the last of them had gone. And it's so sad.
That's what I was thinking, slightly morbid, but as I was looking at the summaries of Golden Girls and thinking about how they could work with older people, that would be an issue on the show if someone were, God forbid, to get ill. And that's why they stopped the show, isn't it?
No. B. Arthur just wanted out. She was not having it. We can get into BTS drama if you want.
I really want to get into the BTS drama between B. Arthur and Betty White. I believe Betty White was the only person who was a household name in the UK.
It was the Mary Tyler Moore Show. But Betty White was a pioneer. She got her own sitcom in the 50s before women, I guess Lucille Ball was the other one. But she was an absolute television pioneer and had done hundreds of game shows playing herself, just being sassy and hilarious. So everybody knew the real Betty White, which I think allowed her to really cut through. Because B. Arthur, I don't think she was on game shows. So you saw her on stage or on your screen and that was it. But Betty White was like part of our lives. if that makes sense.
Yeah. And people have probably had a closer parasocial relationship to her then, if they felt like they knew who she was as a person. Let's get into the B. Arthur BTS drama. What are your thoughts? How did this information come to you? Can you explain all of it for our listeners who might not be in the know?
Well, the first time I ever heard of it, I was right out of college and I was doing summer stock, which is our version of like regional theater. And somebody that I was performing with said, oh, last summer I was at the Cleveland Playhouse and B. Arthur was our guest actress and she was amazing. And we shared a dressing room or something like that. And she said B. Arthur would drink after the show and then just start spewing. Like, what do you want to know, kid? I'll tell you everything. So the person said, B. Arthur said, and I quote, and Betty White, I hope she gets hit by a bus on her way to Happy Town. So they were just very different. And now since then, they've even done interviews where they said there was no love lost, that they tried to remain professional and respect each other, but they were very, very different. B. Arthur is very dry and sarcastic and professional, and Betty White was like a happy little mischievous, let's have fun. And that didn't work. And then Rue McClanahan was always in between them both. She was always quoted as saying, they were both my dear friends. And it was hard because they didn't get along. And then you said someone got sick. And it occurred to me, Estelle Getty, who was the youngest of the four. And P.S., they were my age. They were in their 50s when they did the show. You keep saying like older actresses. They were in their 50s, like early 50s. They didn't have plastic surgery. It was like a different time.
Oh my God, I feel so bad. For some reason, yeah, you're so right. I assumed that they were in their 70s. I've been completely brainwashed by seeing so much plastic surgery and Botox. I'm so embarrassed.
Oh, don't be embarrassed. There was like a meme that went out a few years ago when Sex and the City rebooted, which I didn't watch. And it was like those four women at 60, Botoxed and plumped and plastic compared to the Golden Girls at 60. And it's just an interesting comparison. Estelle Getty did suffer memory loss. She was losing her memory towards the end of filming. So they were planting her lines on the table and on her purse. Her memory became an issue. But it wasn't like, I'm sick, I can't do the show anymore.
Hey there, do you like 90s movies?
Are you a millennial?
If the answer to either of these questions is yes, join me, Andreen,
and me, her brother Joel, as we rewatch 90s movies, determine their themes, and discuss how well they've aged.
We review movies based on your requests and provide a rewind rating between 1 and 5 based on how likely it is for us to rewatch them again.
So far, we've covered movies such as Clueless. Put it there, Pops. Is your broad ready yet? Like, what? He came into her house mad disrespectful, bro.
Mrs. Doubtfire.
He enters a plea of insanity because he says,
oh, that's right.
I'm crazy about my kids.
Yeah, he did say that.
How do you plead in this custody case? I plead unfit. Soul Food.
Why does the husband Lem have no accountability whatsoever?
Nah.
It really annoyed me. No one said, oh, I can't believe this is your man embarrassing you. It's like, I can't believe she's doing this to me on my wedding. It's like, but what about the man? What about your husband? Mission Impossible. He just goes into the system and puts in like disavowed. And, then, and it just builds up a list.
He did a Google search. And he was like, oh, Ving Rhames, that's my man. Never Been Kissed.
He said, you expect me to be happy because now I can actually be attracted to you? And it's like, yes. And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't look at you the same. So in my head, I'm like, so you want her to be 17? Like,
exactly.
It was very, very creepy. And many more.
Follow Rewind Rewatch, a 90s movie podcast, and listen in to see how we rate your favorite 90s movies. Adios.
Later.
Going back to your story about someone who was sharing a dressing room with B. Arthur, I don't know how prestigious this theatre program was, but I'm like, I can't imagine it having that much access to someone who was such a huge celebrity at the time, and also not having them media trained and NDA tied up. One of the things that we talk about on the show a lot is the excessive media training and the PR battles that go into everything, and especially because, in my opinion, a lot of the success of a movie star is now based off of the parasocial relationship that someone is able to have with them. their image is so polished that I just can't imagine someone being caught bitching about their co-star in such a candid way.
Well, it was 1996, so this person is then going to go, oh, I can't wait to call all my friends on our landlines and tell them the story. So how far is the story really going to get?
Yeah, they're not going to go straight onto TikTok and be like,
Yeah.
you'll never guess who I'm
Right.
working for.
Right.
You watched it a lot during very formative years, and I've revealed how it's manipulated my view of how women are portrayed in the media. Did it encourage you to think about yourself in a certain way? Did it influence you in any way that you can describe?
I think mostly it influenced my desire for deep, lasting friendships. My friends are my world. I think I'm a good friend. I try to be, and I will prioritize my friends over a romance or over other things. Yes, Sex and the City showed us that, but Golden Girls was like, I hate the expression ride or die, but they created that. They were choosing each other, and it is really beautiful. And it made me think getting older won't be so bad if I'm doing it with my friends, you know?
I do think as well we're hopefully returning to that. I think there's a renaissance of emphasis on friendship. It feels really, really wonderful, because I do think we had a moment there as like a society of being extremely individualistic. I would argue that in Sex and the City, there are big moments, but they toss each other to the side a lot for their boyfriend or husband or whatever. And I think they moved away from that in the reboot slightly. But yeah, it's such a beautiful message to take away from that. And it is something that seemed really, really central.
I wonder if the pandemic made people yearn for friendship more. Maybe it sparked something in us.
I hope so. That would be a really big silver lining of the pandemic, to realize how much we need each other. I was isolating during the pandemic, initially for the first stages of it completely by myself. And I love my own company. Like, I often joke about the fact that I prefer to be by myself. If I'm around someone for too long, I'm like, please leave me alone. But even I was like, after 2 weeks of properly quarantining by myself, I was like, this sucks. And you don't realize how much you rely on those interactions to make you human. And to not be connected to that was really, really tough in a way that I never thought I would have that problem. Which Golden Girl are you?
Oh boy, I hate that I'm a Dorothy. Like, I know I'm a Dorothy. I'm sarcastic and I'm cynical. I'm a cynical person. I want to be a Rose and say, oh, I just see the best in everybody. And I'm too puritanical to be a Blanche. Although Blanche is my favorite. Like, humor-wise, she just crushed every joke. So when they were casting the Golden Girls, they reached out to Betty White and Rue McClanahan, who had previously been on television playing similar characters to Blanche and Rose. Betty White was Sue Ann Nivens on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and she was aggressive and sexual and always hot for Lou Grant. And then Blanche was Maude's best friend on Maude, and she was ditzy and adorable and didn't quite keep up. And so that's how they offered them the parts. And the two ladies were like, we want to switch. But Betty White is so sharp and so quick-witted that I wouldn't have seen her as a Rose, but she was perfection.
You just said you wish you were a bit more of a Rose. You wish you were a bit more optimistic. I was about to say, I feel exactly the same way. I think there was a time in my life where I was definitely more optimistic. I just wrote a whole book proposal about how I've become really cynical, and it's really stressed me out. I think it's the past few years have been really tough for a lot of people, but I've noticed myself saying things that I'm like, wow, that doesn't sound right. And I don't want to be one of those people that ages into cynicism. So maybe I need to be reading the sacred texts and seeing Rose again.
Embrace your inner Rose.
Which storylines did you find the most compelling, and which struck you as outlandish or inconsistent with the character arcs?
Inconsistent with the character arcs. That's interesting. They did a lot of very, very outlandish things, but they made me laugh, so I forgave them. They hosted a wedding at the house, and Rose confused the mailing lists, and she invited everybody from her Elvis fan club to the wedding. So it was just like dozens of Elvises in the living room instead of inviting Dorothy's friends to her wedding. One of those Elvises was Quentin Tarantino, by the way. I think in a long-running sitcom, there's always going to be an episode that makes me go, she wouldn't really have done that. They did a very special, controversial HIV episode early on in the series where Rose finds out I got a transfusion years ago and now they think my blood might have had HIV. It was one of the few times they dropped into something very emotional and real. And like Sophia doesn't want to share a same mug. I'm glad for that episode. It felt a little after school specially to me, and it didn't land the way other issues did. Like they get a gun at one point because somebody broke in, and there are other issues they dealt with a ton of humor.
That's a very fair critique. You mentioned the finale being one of the most compelling. Were there any other storylines that you were like, this was perfection, no notes?
A lot of them. Very early on, Rose can't find a job because she's old and she's struggling. I don't remember seeing a woman of a certain age saying, no one will hire me, no one will even give me a chance, because she didn't have enough work experience because she had, God forbid, raised a family. Her husband was there, and now her husband's gone and she has to find a job. I found that very eye-opening and meaningful, and they handled it with great humor. There are so many moments. Dorothy is afraid to get a foot surgery that I might have to have. And Jonas, my writing partner, is so excited that I might be getting the Dorothy's borne surgery. But she is being a baby. I hate hospitals. I don't want to go. I don't want to get a foot surgery. And her roommate in the hospital is having major surgery, like life-threatening stuff. And it puts everything in perspective real fast. You mentioned the homelessness. That episode will gut you. They have a jacket that once belonged to Michael Jackson, allegedly, or a Top Gun jacket. I can't remember. And one of them puts a winning lottery ticket in it. And then they accidentally give the jacket away to a shelter. So they go to the shelter like incognito to get the jacket back. And they realize, us winning $10,000 is nothing. It means everything to these people. And they end the episode with a cappella version of someone singing, "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?" And it's just like, what happened? This is Golden Girls, and now I'm crying at the homeless crisis. They did handle a lot of things very well and poignantly.
I think these storylines are so important because it humanizes people and it takes away the idea that they are somewhat complicit in the way that they split up the women in that episode so that they were able to tell more than one story.
And they're all very powerful.
Exactly. When I took on this project, or started this project, I took on this project as if it was like thrust upon me. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is that people will be like, oh, well, what did, Golden Girls really do? It was an 80s sitcom. And I'm like, I think these moments in the media are so important because they tell a story that is quite difficult to tell you, and you see the characters that you love and admire so much interacting with a story that you might find difficult to consume. And that does a lot. I'm sure that changed a lot of people's minds, hopefully. What are your thoughts on the cultural impact of the Golden Girls?
Well, I think people have very short memories. The women who were allowed to anchor a show were few and far between. And Mary Tyler Moore did it, and she was perfect. But I think people would argue like, oh, but Ed Asner and Ted Knight and all these other actors were so hilarious on the show, and they were. It wasn't about women. And going back, Saturday Night Live, everyone loved Gilda Radner and Jane Curtin, but the men were the breakout stars. I think this paved the way for Lena Dunham and Roseanne and all of these women to come to the fore and say, I have stories to tell and I can be hilarious as I tell them. Ironically, the show was written almost entirely by men, except Susan Younger-Witt. But front-facing, it was women being funny. And I think that has broken some glass ceilings, I hope.
Have you seen the second Devil Wears Prada?
No.
One of my biggest critiques in a lot of movies, especially movies that are anchored in women, is that it's quite clear that the writers didn't have confidence in women being the central focus. And a lot of them are validated by a romantic story with men. Often when we're coming out of movies, I'll be like, I just found that romantic relationship, if anything, it detracted from the narrative arc. And it just seemed like a distraction, and it seemed superfluous to the main storyline. In the first Devil Wears Prada, the way that her boyfriend functioned was to be the foil to her career progression. And it was very, very impactful, and people still talk about it now. And in the second Devil Wears Prada, it is so unnecessary, and it truly adds nothing to the story, in my humble opinion. And we came out, and my partner was finally like, I get it. I get what you've been saying. It was nothing about this gentleman's performance. Like, it was fine. It was just the relationship in and of itself just added absolutely nothing to the narrative. It didn't further the storyline in any way. It didn't add any stakes. I wasn't compelled by it. It was nothing. And I'm like, what is the point? So I think you're right. I think it did break some glass ceilings, but it's a big issue of mine.
Sure.
Watching a lot of movies that I'm like, why is this person here?
Makes total sense.
What do you think defines a Golden Girls fan? What do you think people are drawn to when they watch it?
Well, I think it appeals to women and the gays. And I say that with all the love in my heart. Everyone in my life is gay. But because we felt unseen and underrepresented or disenfranchised. In the 80s, there weren't gay characters on TV. So they could relate to these women who were saying, no one sees me, no one recognizes me. And that is a comfort, I think. And then the humor just crosses every line and appeals to everyone.
It still plays a role in the culture today. What do you think it is?
There was an ABC documentary that aired last year about its cultural impact and why it's still so beloved and sparking such fandom. They interview Cheryl Lee Ralph and Kelly Ripa and all of these people who say, oh, it was immensely impactful for me and inspiring for me. Look, I think conceptually it's inspiring, blah, 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 but the jokes are just so fucking funny. The writing is just so good. I think that's what makes it endure. If not, people would say, no, I get it. I've seen it. But you want to watch it again or you want to introduce it to somebody because the jokes are perfection.
Okay, final question. Who is your celebrity crush?
I have a few.
Ooh.
I do. So I'll stick with the one that lasted the longest for me, and I have met him. It's Taye Diggs. So he became famous for doing Rent on Broadway, and then he was very successful in movies and TV, and he's so handsome and charismatic, and he can sing and dance, and he's so charming. And my husband and I would always say that was my hall pass, right? That's
nice.
But then we saw him at the mall, and Jer was like, go for it. He's right there. Go for it. You have my blessing. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go up to him at the mall and hit it on him. And I have met him and shaken his hand and spoken to him, but I'm not actually going to go for it. I've had access.
Did you say when you went up to him in the mall, or did you
I
see
didn't.
him
No,
another time?
no, didn't say anything in the mall. But I had met him at a show and at a function, and all I did was shake his hand and say, "Hi, nice to meet you." I'm not like a fangirl. If I get to meet people, I don't want to say I'm a big fan. I just want to say, "Hi, nice to meet you."
But do you feel the starstruck?
Oh yeah. Like I met Mary Tyler Moore, my all-time idol. I met her.
Where would you meet her?
So I was volunteering at an animal shelter, and there was a big Broadway benefit for animals. And my shelter sent me, and they were like, you have to wrangle these kittens and watch over them and take care of them and then hand them off to Bernadette Peters and Mary Tyler Moore, who are two of my all-time idols. So I was the kitten lady because I volunteered at the shelter. So, of course, they come over before the thing. Oh, hi, I'm Mary. Can I hold a kitten? Let me see. And I was just like, hi, Mary Tyler Moore. Hi, Bernadette Peters. And I was like hanging with them and the kittens. It was pretty cool.
Of all the things as well, being a kitten lady is not only salient, but it's also a very good thing to be. I would love to be the kitten lady.
There was someone there saying, okay, so give the kitten lady back the kitten and she'll hand it to you, to bring out on stage. It was all very technical and rehearsed. They were very nice and very charmed by the kittens.
How can people find you?
Well, I do have a website, mandykaplan.com, if you want to see it all. My movie, 30 Nights of Sex to Save Your Marriage, is on Tubi, and my podcast is Make Me a Nerd, anywhere you get your podcasts.